Welcome. I'd like to welcome members and officers to this Cabinet meeting and also to welcome anyone watching online. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to take attendance of officers attending virtually and to explain how proceedings will work. Thank you, Susan.
Good evening. Can I confirm that the following officers joining us remotely can hear us and that we can hear them? Anthony Roach.
Good evening, I'm here.
Good evening. Phil Doggett.
Yes, can hear you, thank you.
Good evening. Rumi Bose. Ben Evans.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good evening. Neil Parlett.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good evening. Rachel Rooney.
Yes, I can hear.
And finally, Martin Lawrence.
Good evening, present.
Are there any other officers in attendance remotely this evening that I haven't called out? Speaking. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. Voting. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. Are there any questions? No. I will now hand back to the chair.
Thank you, Susan. Item 1, apologies for absence. I received no apologies for absence. Councillor Tamsin Thomas has advised that she'll be arriving late this evening. Are there any other apologies? Good. Item 2, minutes, the 14th of April 2026. I'd like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meetings of Cabinet held on the 14th of April 2026. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Nolan, thank you. Any comments? Thank you. Susan, could we go to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 3, notification of other business. There's been no other business notified. And item 4, Chair's announcements. In accordance with the Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recordings will be available on both the Council's YouTube channel as well as on the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from the meeting. Members are reminded that this Council has declared both a climate emergency and ecological emergency. These are serious decisions and mean that, as this is an emergency for all of us, officers and members have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. For the purpose of clarification, 4.8.23a, the Constitution, does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of that item, be able to vote. However, please do be mindful of the business on the agenda. Whenever possible, leave at an appropriate point in the proceedings. I have agreed to change tonight's agenda order. Agenda items 18 to 21 will be taken as the final items on tonight's agenda following the conclusion of agenda item 24. Item 5, public participation. We have no public participation this evening. Item 6, items referred from other committees. 6A, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Local Government Reorganisation and Funding, to be considered with item 12. 6B, Churchgate Regeneration Project Update and Next Steps, Part 2, to be considered with item 20. 6C, Churchgate Regeneration Project Update and Next Steps, Part 1, to be considered with item 21. 6D, Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, Revenue Budget Outturn 25 to 26, to be considered with item 15. 6E, Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, 25 to 26 year-end report on risk management and governance, to be considered with item 14. 6F, Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, Capital End of Year Review, 25 to 26, to be considered with item 17. 6G, Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, Treasury Management End of Year Review, 25 to 26, to be considered with item 16. Item 7, Strategic Planning Matters. Councillor Donna Wright to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the regular report that we receive on key planning and transport issues affecting the council. So I think briefly the main items to note are there's some national changes to planning decisions and delegation. Firstly, councils must now consult the Secretary of State before refusing planning permission for housing schemes of 150 plus dwellings, with a 21-day call-in period to allow ministers to decide whether to call in the application for central determination. So that's obviously quite a significant change. A new national scheme of delegation will come into force in October. That will basically require more decisions to be made by officers, especially around sort of smaller schemes. And it also limits planning committees to a maximum of 13 members. We currently have 12 members, so that particular change won't affect us. And there will be an update for planning committee members at the next meeting on the 2nd of July. And other members will receive information on that in due course. There's also been a consultation on planning fees, which ended on the 18th of May. And this was basically seeking views on setting fees closer to a full cost recovery and potential local fee setting powers. So we will await the outcome of that consultation. The local plan review, following the national regulations coming into force, the council has now published a notice of intention to review the local plan and a revised timetable. So they were produced in April. We've also published the scoping documentation for consultation, which asks for feedback on the vision and what issues the plan should include, and also how people would like to get involved throughout the new process. The consultation closes on the 28th of June, and there will be more substantial consultations later on in the process. And just to say that we have received government funding of around 108,000 to cover staff capacity and the evidence-based preparation. And the funding is based on us meeting the Gateway 1 assessment by the end of October, which we are on track to do. Should also mention the proposed expansion of Luton Airport. I think people will probably have seen in the news that the legal challenge to expansion was rejected last month, allowing expansion to proceed. Luton Rising will be seeking to progress with implementation of the DCO later this year. Early considerations will include the proposed replacement country park that will be located within North Herts, as well as establishing the required monitoring and review groups that will be needed for the process. Our officers are currently liaising with other Hertfordshire host authorities, including county, and they've contacted Luton Rising to ascertain their next steps so that we can start to work through the implications for North Herts. And a sum of 20,000 has been set aside in the budget for any additional work associated with the DCO. Strategic sites in the local plan, you'll see from the paper that the 6 largest sites are all moving forward and other significant sites are progressing through performance planning agreements and pre-application discussions. Neighbouring authorities, local plans, North Herts are continuing to maintain close contact with 8 neighbouring authorities, despite the fact that the formal duty to cooperate has been removed under the draft NPPF. But inspectors will still test strategic collaboration as part of the local plan examination. So we are still maintaining collaboration with our neighbours. Some authorities, such as Luton and Central Beds, are at the same stage as ours with their local plans, and they're put out to consultation for their scoping documents. Since this paper was published, there have been a couple of updates. Stevenage went to Cabinet with theirs on the 10th of June, and they're recommending adoption of their local plan with a partial update. And they're looking to adopt on the 22nd of July under the legacy system. St Albans have consulted on main modifications and intend to adopt their local plan by the end of June, and that's also part of the legacy system. One more thing to mention, I think, is the draft town centre strategy. As members will know, that was consulted on in December. The final version will be presented to Cabinet for adoption in September. And the supporting delivery plan will be prepared during the winter in collaboration with the economic development team. So I think the overall key message for members is that the new planning reforms will significantly reshape and speed up plan making, particularly the new national rules shifting more decision making towards officers, which will come in October. The strategic sites are progressing, but infrastructure and legal agreements remain critical. And obviously we are sometimes reliant on county for those. We need to sort of continue collaborating with our neighbours, and obviously county-wide planning is essential in the lead up to LGR, and officers do continue to hold regular meetings with neighbouring authorities. And obviously we will continue to liaise with Luton Rising and the other relevant authorities in terms of the work around the airport expansion. So I think that's it really. So I'd like to propose that Cabinet notes the report.
Thank you. First of all, can I ask if there are any questions for Councillor Wright? Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you. On 8.14, Luton Rising, have we had any contact or any discussions regarding changes to our motorways or roads in North Herts, or planned changes to our motorways or roads in North Herts to help with the increased traffic flow expected from this?
Is that going to Nigel?
Not directly at this point. Obviously, traffic implications were considered as part of the development consent order, and now that the legal proceedings appear to have finished and they'll be moving forward with that, we'll be sort of setting up the relevant groups, of which one was the sort of transport monitor and manage group, to basically make sure that the conditions in the DCO are complied with going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Albert.
Just thanks, Chair, and thanks, Donna and officers, for a very comprehensive report. Really is appreciated. Three questions. First of all, around the town centre strategy, was there is there further sort of consultation happening on that, or is it effectively we've had the consultation and we'll have the final document and then move to the delivery plan? But if you just sort of clarify that. Do you want me to stop there or ask the other two questions?
The time.
Yeah, that's fine.
We haven't built it in to have further consultation, but I know there was a question raised at the Hitchin Forum. So this is something I'm going to talk to Nigel about. And it may be that we could build in, it'd have to be a very short period of further consultation with the forums.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful. And obviously
the chair of Hitchin Forum. So that's appropriate.
And obviously that, no doubt, that's not obviously not just a Hitchin issue. It's clearly obviously relates to the other towns as well. So, but obviously was specifically asked at Hitchin. The other two questions will I think hopefully can sort of combine slightly together. One which was around just whether so your officers could just sort of update us when we can expect any report back around the Section 106 task group report that we had I think at our last meeting. And then the final question was around this probably is to Nigel, but obviously if you've got comments, is around clearly there have been decisions from government around Dacorum and Hartsmere in the last day and so on. Just really interested just to obviously get any views around those particular decisions, but obviously any impacts there are on North Herts, and hopefully we're not in the same situation.
Ian, 'cause people
Yeah.
don't know.
So
First.
okay.
Then do we come back to that and explain?
Yeah.
Is that
Okay.
okay?
That's fine.
Do you want to? I mean, in section 106, I think it's fair to say that it's still on the to-do list, to be honest. Nigel and I are planning to meet as soon as we can to post holidays. We both to discuss how we're going to take that forward. Nigel, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Not on that one, but if I can address then the second question about the special measures, as Councillor Alberts alluded to, so 2 planning authorities in Hertfordshire, Hertsmere and Dacorum, were placed into special measures by the government yesterday, and that's for failing to meet national performance targets in relation to the quality of decision making for major developments. They were 2 of 9 authorities in the country that have been placed in special measures. That performance is measured by considering the number of major decisions that are overturned at appeal as a percentage of all the decisions made, and the threshold to be considered for designation is 10% of your decisions overturned. What that means in practical terms for those authorities is that applicants now have the choice of applying directly to the inspectorate, the planning inspectorate, for their major developments until further notice, which obviously therefore bypasses the local authority, both in terms of decision making, but also in terms of fee income. As I said, the threshold to be considered for designation is 10%. We're just below that threshold at the moment at 9%, but given the relatively low volume of major applications we determine, it does mean our percentage figure basically turns on individual appeal decisions. So I think it's a reminder to all of us about making sort of robust decisions when schemes come before us, and also, which Councillor Wright briefly alluded to, managing the throughput of applications, because obviously that's the other side of the equation. The more major decisions that are in your pot, effectively the more latitude you have with that 10%. So yeah, need to work with county and internal colleagues to make sure that we're progressing schemes once they've been to Planning Control Committee and getting decisions issued.
Thank you. Yes, I was talking to the leader of Hertsmere this afternoon, just after he got the information. So it's very hot off the press. Okay, so the recommendation: note the report on strategic planning matters. Note the response in Appendix A. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wright. And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Albert. Debate. Councillor Nolan?
Yeah, thanks for the reports, both to you, Donna, and to officers. I think it's the piece on my mind. I think there's a point raised by Councillor Allen, especially considering into the future the effects of Luton Airport expansion, the engagement at Luton Rising. There is clearly going to need to be interventions there, and I know that there are initial discussions that have been held about what that could look like, the scope of activities. I think it's very early days at the moment, but given the expected change in traffic use, and given I think already anyone who's driven through Hitchin at times where usage of the airport's high already, there clearly is going to have to be some sort of mitigation intervention undertaken. So I think it'd be really useful to sort of get feedback on that in the next few months as those relationships develop and we have a better idea about what that will look like. Yeah, I think that's probably the key unknown outside of our control, and something we just have to manage as best we can at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Allen.
just wanted to take the opportunity to say how much I like the letter that you sent regarding the chalk streams. I know it was a letter that we were asked to send, but you have worded it very well, and it does point out how lucky we are to have these wonderful World Heritage status sites, or hopefully to have some new World Heritage status sites here in North Hertfordshire.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Albert.
Thanks, Chair, and very much endorse that point Councillor Allen's just made around the chalk streams. And yeah, that letter was welcome and well written, and I think was well received. I think just coming back to sort of Councillor Nolan's point, I mean, I think the important thing here, an important message that I think that we would want to send, I think, as a council, as a cabinet around, you know, the Luton Airport development is that clearly a settled position has now been reached legally on this, and in terms of that. But this doesn't mean that we as a council then say, okay, well, that's it then, that's fine. You know, this is obviously the time, and I think as Councillor Nolan indicated, and Councillor Wright mentioned earlier, you know, that where we want to be active and intervene and seek to influence what decisions are made for the benefit of all our residents across North Herts, where we can see improvements and obviously mitigations around transport, as Councillor Nolan touched on. So I think it's important to, you know, really to send that message out, is that whilst obviously that is the case, that development is likely now to begin to continue and to develop and so on, we obviously as a council will want to continue to be actively engaged with that, with our partners in Luton and elsewhere, in order to be able to secure some of those improvements that we know are absolutely fundamental and essential to actually deliver a successful project, and actually to make sure that we don't get the kind of log jams and traffic jams that we fear, and improve our transport infrastructure in North Herts. And there is an opportunity here. So, you know, I hope that we can continue to do that and influence that. And I'm sure, I know that you Donna, and the officers will take that on board and will be very much actively engaged in this.
Thank you. Other contributions? No. Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 8, Developer Contributions SPD. Councillor Donna Wright to present the report.
Just to remind Cabinet of the background on this. So following the adoption of the local plan in November 22, the council adopted a developer contributions supplementary planning document. I think it was February 23. And this was in order to provide kind of additional details for developers and case officers about developer contributions, which can obviously be used to make a development more acceptable. It was decided in 2024 that we should review and update the SPD, as there was quite a lot of information in there that was out of date. Obviously, a lot has happened in planning in the last few years. So there were a number of areas where updates were made, including deleting references, updating and providing additional details around biodiversity net gain, updating the open space standards to reflect the new guidance published by Fields in Trust, and kind of general updating of relevant strategies and guidance where those have been updated or new guidance has been published. So the draft SPD came to Cabinet in September last year, and we approved it for public consultation at that time. So we received 55 individual responses to the consultation, and as a result, a number of further amendments have been made to the SPD. These amendments are outlined in section 8.3 of the report. Also to say that you should have seen an email sent today from Nigel we did receive a letter dated today from one of the strategic site developers with a concern around section 7.2 of the document, which they're alleging sets out a formulaic tariff for healthcare contributions, and that this is contrary to government planning practice guidance and to statutory tests relating to developer contributions. So the officers have reviewed the query in the overall context of the SPD and wider council policies, and are confident that the SPD does not set a fixed tariff for healthcare contributions. Instead, it explains how the Hertfordshire and West Essex Integrated Care Board calculates potential costs, which are then considered as part of a wider case-by-case assessment. So the document as a whole makes it clear that all contributions must meet legal and policy tests, ensuring they are fair, reasonable, and proportionate to each development. So essentially, officers are not recommending that this late query should prevent adoption of the SPD. We don't have an option to defer, as the 30th of June is the final cut-off date for adopting SPDs under the new planning regulations. So I would like to propose that we approve the final version in Appendix 1 for adoption.
Would the councillors like a few minutes to actually read these letters? Yes. Shall we have a comfort break? It is now a minute to 8. If we come back at 7 minutes past 8. Sorry.
So we're pausing up for any questions and recommendations.
Yes,
Yes.
so that we read the letters and have a comfort break.
Okay.
Okay. Right, thank you. So Thank you. Everyone's now had time to read their letters. A suggestion made during the break was that Nigel Smith might like to read us his statement, which might explain it to us all better.
Thank you, Chair. As obviously was outlined before the short break, we received a letter on this item from solicitors representing Bloor Homes today, who raised concerns about the adoption of the Developer Contributions SPD. The letter in relation to this item alleges that the section of the document around health contributions firstly sets out a formulaic tariff for healthcare contributions, and that approach is contrary to planning practice guidance. Obviously, we've reviewed the letters and circulated to yourselves in advance of the meeting. I think from my view, and having obviously discussed with the officers who produced the report, the relevant section of the SPD that we're looking at, section 7.2, is effectively presented as a statement of fact as to how what is now the Hertfordshire and West Essex Integrated Care Board interact with the local planning authority, rather than per se a statement of how we will act. And you can see that in the document, where it sort of states quite plainly the ICB calculates the general medical services costs using the following formula, and then goes on to explain that. And that's obviously based on advice they've provided to us. We don't have direct control over the ICB and how they consider applications and generate requests is ultimately a matter for them. What's important is how we consider them. And so in that context, as Councillor Wright said, that advice is just one section within SPD, which should be looked at as a whole. And within that document, and particularly in introductory sections, that sets out the council's overall approach to considering any requests for contributions. So in the first section of the document, there's sort of clear recognition of the relevant regulations that govern developer contributions. There's an explicit statement that says whether or not an obligation meets the tests will be considered on a case-by-case basis. And similarly in section 2, where it states that all contribution requests will be coordinated by the case officer at North Herts to ensure that correct processes are followed, applications are dealt with fairly, and all requests for contributions are assessed to meet the relevant tests. There's also a reference in the introduction to section 7, which also covers things like education, that social infrastructure is essentially normally the single biggest ask of applicants on development sites. And so in having regard to those requests, we'll follow the general approaches in the introductory sections of the document. So I think in that context, my professional view is that I'm sort of satisfied the SPD takes a rounded approach, clearly sets out how contribution requests put forward by the ICB or indeed any other third party will be considered in accordance with the regular requirements. And then if we zoom out a bit beyond the SPD, that approach is kind of reinforced by wider policies, wider requirements. So the parent policy in the local plan, which is policy SP7, also quite clearly says contributions must be fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind. And similarly, the National Planning Policy Framework, which is a material consideration for all developments, again reiterates those 3 statutory tests. So although yes, the way the ICB approach it does use an element of formula to how they generate the requests, I think that's quite clearly set out. That's their approach, and we also set out how we deal with those requests going forward when we look at individual cases.
Thank you. Any questions specifically about what Nigel's just told you? Okay. So the recommendations are that Cabinet adopt the Developer Contribution SPD attached as to Appendix 1, revoke the 2023 Developer Contribution SPD, delegate authority to the Director, place in consultation with the Executive Member for Place to make any minor non-material corrections, including not limited to cosmetic additions. Yes?
Really sorry, with the aircon and you looking away from the microphone, I cannot hear you.
Right. Delegate authority to the Director. No. Delegate. Delegate authority to the Director. Sorry, again now. Delegate authority to the Director. Place in consultation with the Executive Member for Place to make any minor non-material corrections, including but not limited to cosmetic additions or presentational alterations to the adapted developer contribution SPD as considered necessary for publication publicity in accordance with the relevant regulations. Please do not ask me to say that all again. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wright, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Daniel Allen. Thank you. Debate. Councillor Albert.
Just briefly, Chair. I thank obviously everyone for the paper. I support the paper. I read carefully the letter from the solicitors for Bloor Homes, but I'm obviously also read carefully Nigel, our director for Place, Nigel Smith's response, and obviously also his both written and verbal response. And I think based on the assurances and his professional advice there, which I'm very happy to take, and I think makes sense to me, looks rounded and in principle, I think it's sensible and logical advice. I'm very happy to take on board that and therefore support the paper as it's set out here.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you. I'm really excited to see this going forward. The work we've done on the SPDs has been an absolutely exemplar version of what we do as North Herts Council. So Anna and the team have put together a brilliant piece here, and I am really looking forward to it being used as the way forward for all of our new planning.
Thank you. Any other comments? Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 9, North Herts Design Code SPD. Councillor Donna Wright to present.
Yes, sorry, me again. So the draft design code came to Cabinet in February, if you all remember. And obviously leading up to that, all members had an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback at several excellent member workshops that have been held over the past year. So the draft went out to consultation and we received 68 individual responses. Most of them were quite technical and have been addressed, and there are details in the paper on that. In addition, some respondents raised procedural concerns, which again have been comprehensively considered, and the officer's expert view is that they should not prevent the SPD from being adopted. So the kind of detailed reasoning on this, along with the responses to the technical issues, are set out in the statement of consultation that's attached as Appendix A to the paper. In addition, we received a second letter from Bloor Homes today, dated today's date, that also had a concern on the design code, essentially that it could be interpreted as going beyond guidance and imposing mandatory standards that could conflict with existing approved master plans. So Nigel and the team have looked at this and have now made a minor alteration to the text in the use and application section of the code, which is page 9 of Appendix B to the report and page 221 of the overall agenda reports pack bundle. So I think this amendment does make it clear that existing plans must be consistent with the design code, unless this would conflict with principles to commitments established earlier, or design parameters or details have already been established. So hopefully you've all seen that email from Nigel, and I'm sure he'll be happy to give further details on that. So with that query addressed, I would like to propose that we accept the recommendations as outlined in the report.
Thank you. Any questions? Nigel?
Would you like me to do the same run through again?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just to similarly as we just did with the last item, just run through the content of the letter that's been received and again sort of set out the professional view in response to that. So this one will possibly take a little longer because it raises several issues. It identifies 4 issues with the SPD and the approach taken. The first one, as Councillor Wright has covered off, the first section talks about the application of the design code itself, but also within that letter, it does acknowledge the changes that are being put forward within the section that Councillor Wright just outlined and have stated they'd be content with those. So I don't think I need to comment further on that, obviously subject to your acceptance of those amendments. The second point is around whether the SPD introduces new policy. So government guidance is quite clear that SPD should expand on existing policies and provide additional guidance and detail rather than set policies themselves. Again, our professional viewpoint is that that's not a point we'd agree with. The design code effectively gives expression to the principles and the policies set out in the plan, particularly policies SP9, policies D1, which sets out how we like development to look. So in that sense, we'd say this is illustrating what that policy looks like rather than setting policy itself. I think more broadly, it's really important to be clear that design codes are expressly encouraged in national policy. The local plan itself recognises that we'll review SPDs and other guidance on an ongoing basis through the lifetime of the plan. Obviously, the plan is at a fixed moment in time and circumstances change around it. And more broadly, we signalled our intent to take this approach as far back as March 2021 when we set out the programme of SPDs that would be prepared. And in that, we were quite clear that we'd be rescoping the design code SPD to align with National Design Guide, updates to the NPPF and emerging guidance. The third point, and probably the most substantive one in terms of the content of the letter and how it's set out, is around viability. There's an assertion in the letter that effectively the SPD introduces new costs on development, and this should have been tested as part of the SPD's preparation. I think it's important to be clear, there's no specific requirement that a viability assessment has to be undertaken for an SPD, or that SPDs have to be screened or similar to determine where it's necessary. So the relevant bit of the planning practice guidance is that SPDs should not add unnecessarily to the financial burdens on new development. We've approached that as a matter of professional judgment and don't consider that the design code has negative viability implications, either in terms of reducing the quantity of development or overall value. Within the design code itself, you'll see that efficient use of land is one of the key objectives, and in Councillor Wright's foreword, there's explicit reference to moving away from land-hungry development that risks consuming substantial areas of our countryside. It's accepted in national guidance, national policy, that the viability study supporting your local plan is the starting point for considering impacts of viability. And that was predicated on achieving densities of 35 dwellings per hectare on our strategic sites and also building homes to meet national space standards. Again, the officer view is that design code doesn't preclude the density from being achieved through the application of its codes and requirements. And meeting national space standards is a separate policy requirement that sits outside of the design code in the local plan itself. So that stipulates floor space sizes, which must be met for units. And obviously from a developer's point of view, it's saleable floor space that's a really critical component of the value they extract from a development. So that's not impacted by the design code itself. In the case of East of Luton specifically, but for any scheme that kind of falls into this area where some design work has been undertaken, net developable area is already broadly fixed by the master plan. And again, the amendments to the wording that we're putting forward just makes clear that that element of the scheme is fixed and recognises that pre-existing work takes precedence. And obviously, as any scheme works its way through the system, that principle still stands. So, at an outline permission stage, then more detail will be fixed, like the number of dwellings to be delivered or any conditions or any planning obligations. And so when you get to reserve matters and apply the design code, again, those parameters are fixed and take precedence. If there are viability issues, there are existing mechanisms to consider those where they arise, including in national policy, in national guidance, in local plan policy, and in the developer contributions SPD that you've just considered. And finally, the design code SPD also includes a comply or justify approach. So that does allow the developers to put forward their position where they consider requirements cannot be met. The final point they raised in the introductory letter is around the consultation. Again, as per the report, we're comfortable design codes met the relevant regulatory requirements in relation to consultation. We do acknowledge, both in tonight's report and when we came to Cabinet in February, that we've had to compress the timetable to meet the government guillotine of 30th of June to adopt documents in these forms, but that's not been at the expense of meeting necessary requirements. There is no particular requirement to sort of go back round the block and reconsult on amendments to the SPD following the consultation period. Clearly, that could be a never-ending process. At its most extreme, we've prepared the statement of consultation that's required by the regulations, and those regulations effectively require us to consult, summarise the main issues, and set out how they've been considered, which I think is where I stop. And Sana, no? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, any other questions? Okay, the recommendation. Oh, sorry, Councillor Albert.
Thanks. I'm just being was really interested in terms of am I right in thinking there's 3 statutory consultees? Well, and that's probably not the right technical phrase. Sort of Natural England Environment Agency, is that and so on? Is that correct?
I think they're the statutory consultees for the environmental appraisal screening.
Right.
That you have a slightly longer list of statutory consultees for sort of planning consultations, neighbouring authorities and the like, and then obviously other people are general consultees, but all responses are considered equally.
And would you be able to sort of set out sort of briefly where we think we've had to, have made changes to where Natural England have requested that, and indeed, is there areas where we're actually sort of exceeding the standards that they might have expected in terms of accessibility and so on?
I don't think any of the 3 bodies you have cited responded directly to consultation or in terms of requesting amendments to it.
There was one request by Historic England, I think, to change the wording on how we deal with listed buildings and character areas, but that's it.
Thank you. Any other questions? So the recommendations, Stan, would you like me to read them out? No. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wright, and a seconder, please. Councillor Nolan. Yes. Okay, so now we're in debate. Can I just say how much I enjoyed the consultation? I think we've had a really good year, 18 months. By we, I mean the members, where we have been fully involved. We've been out on housing estates and compared them. We've had sessions where we've looked at different aspects of the built environment, been thoroughly involved in the whole process, and as a result, I feel that I do actually understand it, which I think is good. So thank you very much. Councillor Nolan?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, some of those sessions wasn't just councillors, but members of the public as well who attended alongside. And I think some of the discussions we had in those sessions, not just having councillors there, but residents, those who inhabit those areas and probably will inhabit those new areas that come out of through this design code. Some really different ways of thinking, different perspectives, which really helped, I think, in our minds kind of form what we were looking for and how those changes might affect, not just the fact that we'll have houses in developments, but the form of the landscape, the sort of setup, how those environments would be. So, yeah, it was a really, really good process. And I think the output hopefully is something that's going to help shape our district now for, beyond 2028 and hopefully into whichever successor authority we end up in.
Any other contributions? No, shall we go to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 10, waste vehicle fuel arrangements. Councillor Amy Allen to present the report.
Right. So just brief update. So as members know, we have moved towards HVO as a lower emission alternative to diesel to supporting our carbon reduction commitments. However, global events have driven increases in fuel prices. Both diesel and HVO have risen in cost, with HVO remaining significantly more expensive. The current price difference is around 40 pence per litre. If we continue using 100% HVO at current prices, we face an estimated overspend of around £15,000 a month. So, given this pressure, we propose a revised approach. We'll cap the proportion of HVO used within the overall fuel mix. This approach allows us to continue using HVO where possible. It also limits the financial impact on the budget. We can still achieve some emissions reduction rather than stopping HVO use entirely, which is not something that we are entertaining. This is an interim measure, which we will revisit in a few months. We remain fully committed to returning to 100% HVO when market conditions improve and prices stabilise. In summary, this proposal balances cost control with continued progress on emissions reduction. Any questions?
Any questions? No? So the recommendation is the Cabinet approves use of an HVO mix for the Council's large waste vehicles that limits the additional cost to the Council of using HVO over diesel to approximately £5,000 per month from the 1st of July 2026 to the 31st of March 2027. This will be subject to minimum HVO use of 20% unless it became impossible to obtain HVO fuel. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Amy Allen and a seconder, Councillor Daniel Allen. Thank you. Debate. Councillor Albert.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to support the. And indeed, I was consulted on the paper alongside Councillor Allen. I mean, I think this is a sensible and practical paper in the current sort of national and indeed international circumstances, which we hope may improve. Who knows? But let's hope that to be the case. But I think it's important. I think as Amy says, we still want to be in the position to be able to use HVO to some extent, but equally we recognise that clearly there is a financial concern, and I think this paper sets that balance out and hits the right note of being wanting to do the right things here as we've set out, but equally obviously recognising those practical and other financial concerns that we know many of our residents have in other areas in terms of their petrol and diesel costs. So I very much support the paper. As Amy says, we will keep this under review, and we will look to be able, hopefully, as situations change, we'll be able to, as Amy said, go back to where we started from. But I think this is the right way forward for now, and I support the paper, Chair.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Let's go to the vote.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 12, funding for local government reorganisation. Referral from Overview and Scrutiny. May I invite Councillor John Claydon, Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to present the referral on this item. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving us the chance to look at this in ONS. We so we considered recommendations in terms of the capping of spending within sort of 3 tranches that are outlined in the recommendations here. There was some discussion at ONS on a number of issues, which I'll briefly outline. And we also put forward an amendment to the recommendations for your consideration. So first of all, there was some discussion about the training aspect, which is relating to recommendation 2.3, or the third recommendation, in the overall budget for relating to training. There was a discussion around the balance between training for new staff covered by the second recommendation and existing staff. Plea to consider that new staff, that current staff are not ignored or disadvantaged relative to new staff, covering the training costs. There was also discussion about a plea to consider staff wellbeing and overall as we move towards LGR and the consequences for our staff as a result of that process. There was some query about exactly sort of how the allocations would work in terms of the relationship between the county-wide costs and the others, whether there was a clear sort of demarcation between those areas. But that was, I think, answered effectively by the Director of Resources. There was also some discussion about post-spend transparency and delegated decision notices. So just understanding about to what extent there will be transparency after the fact in terms of things being spent. And on decision making where existing projects will ultimately need to be scaled back in order to accommodate the costs of LGR, and as we sort of, I guess, scale down our everything else that we're doing. And with regards to the amendment, there was the Overview and Scrutiny Committee approved an amendment to the second recommendation, which replaces the section saying any spend can be approved by the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council and Executive Member for Resources, to add also the Chair of ONS and group leaders to that list. The Constitution clause relating to, except where the Constitution already requires different approval processes, remains as is.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Claydon? Councillor Wright?
Apologies, I think I'm being a bit slow here. Could we just clarify exactly what the amendments are? You just mentioned one in recommendation 2. Was there another one?
No,
just the one. So it's that amendment in consultation, including the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the political group leaders.
Yeah,
okay.
That's okay.
Thank you.
No.
I'm just going to make a statement of fact, and that is that at the moment, the Leader of the Council and Executive Member of Resources and the Executive Member are probably the only people who actually have got a totally coherent view of what is happening in terms of the recommendations for training, and I think that's why it was narrow. It's not a case of lack of transparency. It's just a reality at the moment, because we're going to meetings all the time. We actually are aware of where the county is at in terms of the county and the 10 boroughs. But that is fine. No questions. Can I pass over to Councillors Albert and Williams, please? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I definitely, you weren't there before. Councillor Debenham.
Thanks, Chair. I get what you say about increasing the consultees, but presumably you'll still allow the said people to have the final say, yeah?
Yes, I think this is just a question of consultation. So I guess giving some visibility to those groups in addition to the others. I don't think there was a suggestion that I or the group leaders should have final say.
Wouldn't this normally be covered by the shadows who are meant to attend briefings and get this information to feed back to their groups and the leaders? Is that happening, and do we have the shadows actually attending their meetings is something that I'd be interested in.
Liam's to answer that.
So the Conservative, can I just be blunt? The Conservative shadow has never attended a single LGR meeting. The Liberal Democrats generally didn't this time round. And just to add an extra point to what you said, Val, I think the point on the training, we're in the situation where we're going to have the same training across all 11 authorities, but that had to be agreed at the Hearts Leaders Group, and it only got agreed last Wednesday. So it's kind of hot off the press stuff. We're on it, but it's, as with all these things, involving a lot of coordination.
Can I say that when we discussed it on Wednesday, certainly someday this week, seems to be all meetings, Councillor Williams was mentioned because all authorities are going to use Councillor Williams' ideas. You were named. Any other comments? So where are we up to? This is questions, isn't it? So Councillor Albert.
Cheers. Thanks, Chair. And I'll turn to those points that John and colleagues have raised at the end. But let me just sort of introduce the paper first. The delegated decision notice of the 22nd of April allocated up to 450,000 of our LGR funding for 4 posts, 2 in HR and 2 in IT, to address emerging significant workload pressures from contributing to the county-wide LGR project and other additional workloads that are linked to LGR. Recruitment is ongoing but not complete yet, so it's probable in terms of this financial year that we won't need all of that allocation. The report set out the mechanism for future use of the funding that was agreed as part of the budget process, the total agreed being 1 million in 26-27 and 1 million in 27-28, less what has already been allocated. The 3 categories of spend are in line with what was in the budget proposal, and the delegations proposed provide a logical governance process. As appropriate, decisions taken would be subject to delegated decision notice. That would likely cover staff backfill and allocations to county-wide costs, which are likely to be on the basis of pooling of funds, as has just been mentioned. The learning and development spend, due to the low value of individual transactions and balancing against existing training budgets, will be allocated in tranches. There will also be monitoring of this spend through the quarterly budget reports, which go to FAR and Cabinet. As stated in the report, the monitoring will need to ensure the individual thresholds are not breached, as well as the overall available funding. Whilst it won't always be precise what costs are solely due to LGR, proposals will go via the office leadership team for initial views and consideration of whether they meet the criteria, and will also be prioritised in the context of the budget available. The report also notes that the significant officer time that is and will continue to be and will increase supporting LGR project work. Now, obviously, in terms of the specific comments that John has made from Overview and Scrutiny, and again, obviously, thank Overview and Scrutiny colleagues for their obviously for their comments and input as always. totally recognise the point around obviously the training and obviously the balance between new staff and existing staff, and clearly, absolutely, because staff are our most valuable resource, the importance of staff well-being across the organisation. And I know the cabinet, and I know that all our councillors right across party, and indeed obviously the leadership team, totally recognise and are well aware of that. It's important, obviously, transparency that John touched on. I think, and I've mentioned in my response here that it will be completely important to be as transparent as how we spend this money, and obviously that so it's both scrutiny and clearly FAR particularly are aware and can obviously critically scrutinise that spend as it happens. And I think in a number of the reports this evening that I'll be delivering, capacity will be very much an issue, and John's touched on that, and I know it's very much something that the leadership team are very conscious of, and obviously this cabinet is very conscious of. There are a huge number of really important projects going on, but we recognise that staff are being stretched in a range of different directions, and then there's LGR as well. So the importance, obviously, of actually make sure in all the things that we do that we're managing our priorities. We'll touch on some of those later on when we talk about council delivery plan, our resources, capital spend, and so on. But clearly, that capacity is always something that is an issue for us, and that's why we have this fund. I think it's important, obviously, just to be clear that clearly that the amendment from scrutiny, as John has set out, obviously only impacts on item 2, as obviously Councillor Wright asked that question, recommendation 2, which is around staffing costs. Training wasn't the issue there, other than how I've set out. The scrutiny discussed it, and I've explained what we'll be trying to do. And equally, obviously, the county allocation, it was clearly very much about those additional staffing posts. I'm happy to propose that we accept that amendment from scrutiny colleagues. However, I want to be very clear here that that consultation will need to be done at pace, because pace is important here. I'm very much happy that we involve the chair of scrutiny and our group leaders as part of that. But obviously, in recognising these things sometimes need to be done quickly. These aren't things that can take days and days and weeks, and I'll come back to you in 4 weeks' time. This is why the importance, in sense of what Councillor Allen asked about, obviously about actually how and obviously colleagues here actually attend briefings and obviously are consulted. So I'm very happy to talk with and obviously that the chair of scrutiny and the political group leaders are involved and ask for their views when we do this. But I think it's worthwhile saying here is that, bearing in mind 450,000 has already been spent, or is being proposed to be spent over the kind of couple of years on the staffing side. Clearly, these aren't going to be regular requests, and you will already work out your maths that actually, if you've spent 450,000 on staffing over 2 years, that doesn't necessarily leave you a huge amount left of that allocation to manage other pressures. But there is amount there. But these aren't things that are going to be happening on any regular basis every few weeks or anything. They will happen when it's important to do so, and we want to be able to do those things quickly, promptly, and at some pace. So happy to accept that recommendation if colleagues are minded to accept it, and I hope that's welcome by scrutiny colleagues. But as I say, with those provisos, very happy to accept that extra recommendation, and obviously the other recommendations that are in the report, Chair. So happy to move and obviously pick up any questions.
Thank you. Should we have I've got a question first. Councillor Daniel Allen.
I'm understanding of the request. I don't particularly like it because of my previous experiences around this topic and the behaviour of the previous, the current leaders of the two political groups. My question is, how will the consultation with them take place, and what strength of influence will they have? I
mean, let me try and answer that. I think and I do recognise your concern, Dan. I mean, and I'm sure there's concerns for all colleagues here, but I think we obviously recognise that this is a really important project. Even if some of our colleagues in other parties don't take that up seriously about how we actually work together, I think we as an administration do take it seriously, and that's why I'm very happy to hold that handout to colleagues to say yes, we're happy to consult you. Ultimately, it is the cabinet's final decision, or indeed the delegated members that are set out in the paper. But as we found with scrutiny, that we can get particular views, ideas, thoughts that may actually even sometimes change our thinking, as long as obviously clearly we need to do that at pace and quickly, and it can't be just delayed and so on. So I'm happy to sort of share that hand, open that hand out to colleagues. I hope they will, our colleagues in the other parties will grasp that and take that on board, that we're happy to try and actually work together on what is a hugely important project for our residents. But clearly, obviously, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think let's try it, and we will do that. My assumption here is that obviously that when that consultation will obviously be done probably by obviously the leader of the council, or indeed by myself with our opposite numbers and so on. But that's my assumption, but I'm happy to listen to any other views.
Thank you. I envisage that I go to a meeting, which is not quite most days. I hold out my hand to the opposition leaders, and then there is a set limited time that I am dealing with the leaders, not with anybody else on this, and that I get a quick response. And if the deadline for response goes, it goes. But certainly we are transparent. We are happy to listen, to consider the point of view. But what it can't become is a debate about everything that we do. And we're working at pace like this. John, I'm going to give you a chance to respond. I'm not too sure if it's in the rules or not, but I'm going to anyway.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, my reading of the way that the recommendation is written is that the delegated authority is ultimately given to the chief executive, and that it's all of us, the consultees, myself and the group leaders, potentially being added to that list. I think what you've set out is perfectly reasonable. It clearly has to be time limited. It can't be something where you can just chip in any time. So I think that's perfectly fine. I think if whether it's whatever the mechanism is to do it, it'd be useful to know what that might look like, so that we can look out for it if it's coming by email, or if it's going to be a meeting. If it's daytime meetings when some of us may be at work, that might be a challenge. But I think it would be good to know what that looks like. But otherwise, I think what you've set out is perfectly reasonable. Ultimately, I mean, I abstained on this on the amendment to this recommendation. I don't have a strong view, but I'm happy to respond if asked.
Thank you. I will give it some thought. Whatever was decided, it will be the same each time. We're not going to be phoning and then emailing, whatever. We've got to have a way of communicating well and quickly. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, there is a kind of rabbit hole in here on something that's quite large. The complexity around decision making on LGR is massive. The complexity is massive, and it's about suddenly to get much bigger. So at the moment, most of the decisions that are being made, for example, on how and when we can run the training, are currently being agreed by 22 individuals, the 11 leaders and chief execs. We'll go to a system of joint committees quite imminently, and those will be like mini councils with different political makeups in each of the 11 authorities, who will then decide and recommend things to the shadow authority. So that's going to stand up quite soon, certainly after the decision is made and before the structural changes order is put down. So So you're then we're currently dealing with 22 people who are trying to make decisions in tandem. We're going to go to 10 times 11, 55. 55 people who are going to try and start doing that very, very rapidly. So I think it needs to be understood. I think it would be right in saying that it would be highly likely that an on-the-day decision might need to be made on some of this stuff. So we're unlikely to be able to undertake to say, a certain number of days. And I know that for that reason, the chief execs are trying to decide among themselves how that 11 take decisions, because some of the chief execs want to scrutinise each other's decisions before the decisions are made, and some of them are saying that cannot practically happen. So it's really massively complicated. I completely agree. Right, let's try this out. I think it'll be quite tricky to do it for some really good reasons that will become more obvious once we start doing the training and explain the complexity of this, because it's going to get massive quite quick. Yeah.
But could I suggest, Councillor Williams, we could try this till September, October? Is that okay? Yeah. Councillor Wright?
Yeah, I was just going to ask clarification following John's comments. Just exactly who does have the authority to approve the spend and who's a consultee? Because I'd assumed it would be the chief executive and the executive member for resources. But yeah, if we could have some clarification on that, please. Ian?
So as written, it would be the chief executive who's ultimately got decision-making powers are delegated to him, and all the others would be consultees, albeit I guess you could take the weight of some consultees more than others, but essentially it's down to the chief executive. And
thank you. Councillor Albert?
So yeah, just to sort of echo that point that Ian Cooper's made, the document as it was written, and let's be clear, what we're talking about here is recommendation 2.2, not 2.1, not 2.3, but 2.2, which is about staffing. And that's where I slightly disagree with Laura, because actually the council-wide costs are not the issue here. This is about where we are looking at some additional staffing need within this council, and that I think will be much more limited and won't necessarily need to be done on quite as quick a timescale as you mentioned. As it's currently written, that additional staffing spend can be approved by the chief executive in consultation with the leader of the council and the executive member for resources. That's the current, except where the Constitution applies otherwise. What the additional proposal is that we should add the group leaders and chair of scrutiny to that process, and I think it's that which could take a little bit of extra time. I don't envisage it should need to take an extra time, because where decisions need to be made on this, it will need to be done at some pace. But whilst obviously in recognising that we may need to come back in the budget as to whether we need additional funding more generally, and that's a discussion for another day about LGR when we come to next February. At the moment, if you think about what we're actually saying here, that we've got £2 million. We've said the 200,000 can be up to 200,000 will be around training costs. We've said that up to £1 million would be on could be on county-wide costs. If we spend the maximum amount on effectively a funding available on training, and effectively the maximum amount in year one around, because there is a cap of £1 million a year around the county-wide costs. The amount of additional staffing money we have available is relatively limited. That's why I say this is not going to happen very often. There will be some occasions, but it will not be happen very often. So I do think we can actually get around this. I'm very happy to take on board, Val's suggestion, albeit that I'm not actually aware, and I'm looking at Mr. Cooper here, I'm not actually aware that there are any other staffing requests in the pipeline at the moment. That will obviously, the leadership team will no doubt come to us, and obviously Anthony's online as well. But at the moment, there aren't any other proposals actually I'm aware of on the table. There may be something bubbling up under the surface, so it's not something that's going to happen a loads of times. So I think we can make this work, and if I can give colleagues those reassurances, and I think it helps us, I think, in terms of our both transparency and the importance of being able to work together on this.
So I'm just actually reading the proposal in large writing so I can see it. Right. Do the councillors have that?
Yes, so that's in the papers because that's the referral from Baroness.
Right. Yes, so
it's just
it's mine. It's mine. Yeah.
petition.
So mine hasn't got it. That's it. Okay, right. So I do believe we're up to any questions of Councillor Albert or Councillor Williams, but we may have got past that. I think we might have asked the questions. As I said, the questions come up. So the recommendations as they stand, with the additional recommendation, which I know I've seen, somebody else will have seen. Have you seen it? Yes. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Albert, and a seconder, Councillor Williams. Debate. Any debate? Councillor Nolan.
I'm very pleased to hear Councillor Williams getting a shout out last week for the work she's done. She's in fine company alongside some of our other officers and staff who have been, I think, highly commended so far for the work they've been doing across the county. In terms of the request that's already been approved, a decent chunk of that was for roles within IT to support that team there because of the amount that they've been doing on the side, that almost slowly seeing their day jobs taken up entirely by LGR to ensure that continued support. So I'm very pleased that we're in the position with the funding we've got there to be able to support staff. I think on the side then, in terms of training as well, it was one of the things that came up in discussions last few weeks about ensuring that, we are aware that the next couple of years will be quite testing for our staff, for our officers. The last thing we want to do is to put in a position where not only can they not know what's happening in the future, but also not have the ability to keep up to date in terms of the areas they work in, not have the ability to take those training courses that would otherwise be there. So, yeah, really glad that we have this in mind when we look at the money available and ensure that we continue to support everyone in those roles, regardless of what happens now between today and the 1st of April 2028.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Any other contributions? Councillor Allen, Daniel Allen.
Well, we know there are no foregone conclusions. We are fortunate to have Laura Williams on this. I will vote in favour of this, but I am anxious about other people's commitment to being involved and getting things done. Not the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, but others.
Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 13, 2025-26.
Item 11, is that?
I missed it out. Maybe I was just getting so excited about getting to the next page. I was so excited. Right. Oh, go back pages now. Where am I?
Councillor Brian, it's just because we've moved the items to the end, so you're on the right page.
I'm on the right page.
Yes, they've been moved to.
I have no idea where I am now. So it's not all the Councillor Albert stuff. It is
As you were, so page. Council.
So I was right.
You are.
I was right.
We never mentioned because moving
Right, don't confuse me more. Count item 13, 2025-26, fourth quarter council delivery plan update. Councillor Ian Albert to present the report.
Give me a moment there, Chair. Well, there's also was there something? No, there wasn't a reference back on this one. There wasn't other items on this one, was there? No, I don't think there was. We've not discussed it elsewhere, have we? No, that's fine. Cool. Council delivery plan. This is obviously as detailed as the end of year update, but generally reflects progress as of early May 26 when the report was drafted. The report also recommends the key performance indicators for 26-27 and that the current incomplete delivery plan projects are retained for 26-27. It's recommended that the Royston Learner Pool project, which I'm pleased that we agreed back in February, will be added to the council delivery plan. 3 projects are shown as having been completed. The King George V skate park, which I think obviously a number of us were there for that. The fantastic work around the waste and street cleansing contract, and obviously thanking Councillor Allen and all the team for actually completing that huge project. And obviously work still continues around that on a business as usual basis. And clearly, obviously, the work we've done engaging the community on our finances. 3 projects, phase 2 of the council building decarbonisation, the local plan review and the museum collection facility have an amber project status. This reflects that milestone due dates have passed. In each case, it's recommended that a new milestone target date is agreed. 2 projects, the Leisure Centre decarbonisation and Town Centre strategy, have a green status, but it's recommended that new target dates are agreed that would extend the overall project timetable. And we touched on particularly the Town Centre strategy in Councillor Wright's paper earlier on. 3 KPIs have a red status, that's care line installations within both 5 and 10 working days, and customer service centre calls answered within 45 seconds. 5 KPIs have an amber status. Paragraph 8.4 and 8.5 details all the actions are being taken. In their meetings last week, both ONS and FAR spoke about resourcing and capacity, as I mentioned earlier. We need to bear that in mind, especially in relation to LGR work. The CDP is our council delivery plan, is our way of monitoring those pressures, and for our corporate projects, how we can determine relative priorities. It's worthwhile also, Chair, whilst it's not directly on the council delivery plan, but obviously we did have a discussion around this at our last meeting. But obviously, again, thanks to Councillor Thomas, Phil Doggett, and the team, we have now appointed an agent to lead on the expressions of interest exercise for Charnwood, and we hope that exercise will begin publicly by mid-July, hopefully even sooner at the latest, and we can actually move forward with Charnwood as a project as well. So, Chair, I'm going to move obviously the recommendations in the council delivery plan paper. They're obviously evolving and so on, and I think again that recognition here that we need to keep this plan under review, and obviously work with executive members across all and staff across all the different portfolios, because there's some huge projects, some really important issues in there. but recognizing that issue of capacity and resourcing is an issue for us and for all councils at the moment, especially with LGR work. And so actually reviewing and keeping our priorities closely monitored and reviewing those priorities as we go is obviously going to be and continue to be critical within both the council plan and the council delivery plan that you've got in front of you this evening. So I'm happy to move the recommendations, Chair, and obviously Mr. Cooper and I are obviously happy to answer any questions that any colleagues might have.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Can I have a proposer, please?
Sure.
Albert and a seconder. Councillor Nolan. Debate. No debate? Should we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 14, 25-26 year-end report on risk management governance, referral from FAR. May I invite Councillor Vijaya Pupalasingham, Chair of Finance Audit and Risk Committee, to present the referral. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Really happy to have this report to have a look at FAR during our last committee on 10th of June. This item, the end of year report on risk management governance, looking at the overall effectiveness of risk management governance arrangements at the council. Headline, I suppose, is there's been no overall changes to the framework from previous referrals to Cabinet. As we can see at page 454 of your Cabinet report, the committee did spend some time looking at the current risk grid for the council. As of early May, council has 7 red corporate risks. The 2 risks with the highest scores relate to, unsurprisingly, local government reorganisation and the comments we've heard previously as well this evening on resourcing. And this will be relating back to a recurrent theme around capacity, which we've already heard from Councillor Albert, which is a concern to the committee across a number of items. The remaining 5 red risks, which we see in the grid, scores of 7 or 8, are the 2 overarching risks around cyber risk and financial sustainability, and then the capital projects that we have ongoing, being Churchgate, decarbonisation of the leisure centres at phase 2, and the museum collection facility. There was also some mention from the committee of potential requirements coming in from the Renters' Rights Act. So that's a new addition to the council's risk register. It's not a major concern for the committee at this point, but just something on the horizon to keep an eye on. And financial sustainability, there was also some discussion at the committee that this risk should reduce some, hopefully, due to the improved financial settlements that are coming from central government. However, there's also the potential for this risk in relation to what we've already heard this evening, global factors, higher inflation, so something to keep an eye on there. But overall, I think the committee is broadly satisfied with the processes in place, but just a few items that we'll continue to keep an eye on. But happy to move those recommendations that this be referred on to full council.
Thank you. Any questions for the Chair of FAR? Councillor Nolan.
Thanks. I was just wondering, Councillor Pupalasingham, if you could expand a little bit on the item around risk through the Renters' Rights Act to the council in particular, and just what the discussion around that was.
Yeah, no, as I say, it was just a mention at this stage because it's just come on onto the legislative landscape, and it's just about whether or not there's any concerns around if council is at risk of any of the requirements in the Act. Are we ensuring that we're in compliance with any of those elements? So again, it's probably one of those that will have more that we can comment on in the next quarter once we see the feed through of the Act. But something to keep an eye on, not a huge thing at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Looking at the risk matrix, Alton Head Common Weir is currently in green. Are we sure that's the right place for it? Because I'm aware that we've been talking about this pretty much since I became a councillor. And while I'm sure a lot has happened that I don't know about, visually it appears nothing has happened over that time because we've not had any kind of strong feedback on it. I'm sure there has been a lot of stuff happening, but I don't know about it. Do we think that it should still be in green, or are we looking at this is something that is now having an impact because it's not happening?
What?
So thanks. I mean, that's a great question. So first of all, there is a report in around this in the council delivery plan section, which obviously sets out what's going to be happening on this, and with the hope that the work that will be done, and we'll have a contractor to do that either in the autumn or possibly in the next spring, depending on looking at the timing of when the best time to do this is. So that there is progress on that, and I think there is a slightly more positive report in the council delivery plan section around that. I mean, I'll probably sort of rely on Mr. Cooper's expertise as to whether we think that's in the remains in the right place, and whether it should be green or amber. But it's certainly there is definite progress, and we are moving to hopefully now to a point of being able to get to appointing a formal contractor to take forward the work, and you can see that set out in a bit more detail in the council delivery plan. But I don't know whether Ian, you want to sort of comment, because I think there will be one or two areas I think in this list that will obviously are kept under review, that where we may need to sort of review both up or indeed down those risks. But Ian, I think we'll have a look at, just cover off the process for doing that.
Yeah, so because we've got the council delivery plan, which sort of has two sections to it. One is around the progress against the project, and then one's associated with the risks about the impact of not doing it. So we kind of monitor the progress through the first bit, and then the risks to sort of sit a bit separately. But I do get the point around it would also help to almost pick up in the risks as well, the risk of delayed delivery. I think as it stands, my knowledge of it is that there is not much risk about not doing it at this current stage, is that it's not doing any harm by not doing it. But clearly we'd like to see progress on our projects at the same time. So I can pick up with the service manager and the director and sort of see what we do, how we send it for next time.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? So, Councillor Albert.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and obviously again thanks to Councillor Poopel and Singham and Farr for considering and commenting upon the report. I think we will certainly obviously keep all of those areas he specifically mentioned within view. We obviously had I know that Farr had a discussion around sort of cyber risks, and I know commented on it on Farr that night. I mean, clearly with cyber risks, I think we've got a good story to tell, but you can never be complacent, and you can never do enough. And I think that's something we are, well aware of, and I know our IT team are well aware of. And but it's always something that we where you've seen one or two councils and the impact of one or two London councils that were hacked and so on upon their services and ability to deliver their services. This is certainly not something we can complacent about, and certainly not being complacent about in an LGR context where it can have might have a wider impact. So yeah, we'll very much, VJ, we'll certainly keep those ones in view as to whether should be there's additional things that we need to take on board. As I say, the detail of the report is contained in the annex. As we said, the purpose of the report is to provide assurance that the council has effective processes in place to manage risk. As Cabinet, we're responsible for risk management FAR provide that support through their monitoring role, and they make the comments and make recommendations to us, as we've heard this evening. The key points, which has been already somewhat been touched on. Paragraph 7.1, which shows our corporate risks, made up of project risks and overarching risks, and clearly LGR resourcing are our most significant risks. Table in 7.2 shows the actions been taken to address the red risks, and clearly that's really important to be able to see how we address those and keep those updated, including any actions completed since the last risks update. Sections 9 and 12 monitor performance in regularly reviewing risks and undertaking training, and obviously the sort of standard invites around our risk group for committee chairs and so on. There's also sections in here covering service risks and activities linked to risks such as insurance, health and safety, and resilience. And clearly, with that risk group obviously also looks at some of the insurance claims that we receive. It concludes obviously with progress against actions and sets new actions for 26-27. As it is the annual year-end report, it's referred on to Council to give them assurance that we do have those effective measures in place to manage risk. And I certainly commend this report, thank FAR for their consideration, commend this report, Chair, to Cabinet, and ask you to approve the recommendations included therein.
Thank you very much, Councillor Albert. Any questions? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, we spoke earlier about the planning special measures, obviously in the context of Hertsmere, etc. And obviously we're hovering around the threshold. I'm just wondering, would that be defined as a corporate risk, or is it a risk that should be just designated within the planning directorate? Because obviously if we did go into special measures, there's a potential loss of planning fee income, which could be quite considerable. So I'm just wondering where that fits.
Jim, the general process is it risk identified at service level first, and then the risk management group will consider those on a regular basis. But yeah, ultimately it's Cabinet's decision as to what we want to treat as corporate risks. So certainly we can, the next risk management group, look into that in terms of a bit of we invite the director or service manager along to sort of talk about that risk, and then make a recommendation via over in scrutiny or FAR as appropriate onto here to consider whether we escalate that risk level.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Albert? No, so the recommendations are to note the report and to recommend to Council to note the reports. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Albert, and a seconder. Councillor Nolan. Debate. Vote. Will you change your minds?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Do you want to continue or do you want to break? Right. You got another 6-minute break. Welcome back. Item 15, revenue budget outturn. Referral from FAR. You may continue.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Got a few referrals this evening. So having conveyed this report that, again, we were able to have a look at our last meeting on the 10th of June, which sets out the 25-26 year-end financial position for revenue expenditure. The reports that you have for Cabinet, the slightly updated version than what we had presented, but the updates we received included a reduction in the reported underspend due to adjustments relating to the waste contract and fleet vehicles. The mobilisation costs for that contract had not yet been reflected in the figures that we had at the time, but we had them at the time of committee provided to us. And although those costs were funded from the waste reserve, there was a shortfall which impacted the overall outturn position. In addition, the budgeted use of revenue reserve to fund the vehicle purchase had not yet been included, affecting the net transfer from earmarked reserves. But as I say, all of those have now been updated and we had a look at those numbers. Table 4, which is beginning at page 468 of your reports pack, outlines the variances in year and the reasons behind them. The total budget proposed to be carried forward into 26-27 is 1.844 mil, and that's detailed at para 8.3 at page 477 of your reports. We considered Appendix A, which provides a bit more info on the breakdown of the variance reported throughout the year. And all the budgets have been revised through each quarterly monitoring cycle. The outturn report gives that final position from the original budget through to the final year outturn. The previous carry forward amounts that you have outlined in paragraph 8.5 on the same page demonstrates that although the plans were in place to utilise these allocations, delivery was constrained by that word capacity and some of the other limitations there. So from the committee's perspective, there was concern both in terms of the capacity, but that there have been some quite significant variances being highlighted, and a consequence of that, there's going to be carry forward required to this financial year as well, potentially. The concern there is if we've got significant carry forward from the committee's perspective being requested to be brought forward to this financial year, is that going to impact on capacity constraints that we then have going forward into 26-27 potentially? The size of variance also in some of the budgeted spend that's been required was also commented on by the committee. In particular, there was quite a focus on the Churchgate consultants, which was a particular point of concern for members of the committee. The overspend, as indicated in the reports, is of 169k, and that's at page 485 of your reports potentially. So there was a bit of concern on that from the committee overall. The commercial waste collection service continuing to lose revenue was also noted during the committee, and whether or not any options were being considered as to how to mitigate that loss of potential revenue coming in. There was also question and discussion on the asylum dispersal grant and how these were being provided to council and the respective allocations to our budget and how those were being itemised. But overall, I think, apart from those concerns around the variances, the rest of the budget, I think we're quite okay with.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No, may I then go on to Councillor Albert, please?
Cheers, thanks, Chair. And again, obviously, thanks to BJ and FAR for their consideration. And I think, I mean, as you'll see from the referral, and I think there's some quite interesting sort of statistics in there. And if you haven't had a full chance to read all of it, worthwhile looking at. For example, on the discussion that we had around car parking. For example, where the number of tickets sold had increased by 4.6%, and this reflected more people parking in council car parks for a shorter period of time. So I think there's some really interesting things in there. PCNs increase, a number of PCNs issued parking notices. So I think, you know, do have a look at those, and it's worthwhile. I'd say Farr obviously gave really some quite detailed considerations. I think two things it's worth saying right up front that I'm very much happy to sort of take on board, and you'll see from table 4 where it obviously looks at the budgets we have and but where we are looking to those differences, those variances, but also where we are looking to carry forward those budgets, and certainly that's something that Ian Cooper and I have discussed about how we sort of carefully review those carry forwards with directors and executive members. Just I think it's important here, as we talked about the capacity and so on, to understand, you know, the nature of these carry forwards, what can be done, when it can be done by, and I think, you know, very much take on board the points made at Farr, and indeed by our independent member at Farr, about being as transparent as we can and transparent as possible about those tables and the commentary in there, to keep that under review, to make sure that obviously there is a bit more of a timeline in there as where there are some things being carried forward, when those things are going to be done by, and not just it's going to be done at some point in this financial year. So there's definitely some challenge there we will take forward, and certainly take on board the point about, and we'll obviously be discussing Churchgate later, and the importance obviously of having external expertise to actually support what is the council's potentially largest project, and I don't back down from actually the importance of actually having that expertise, but recognize that we can be probably sort of more transparent about the nature of the spend, and where possible, if we can set a budget during the budget meeting, which we haven't really been able to do up until now, that obviously adds to that level of transparency. So very much take on board some of the commentary and that obviously Vijay has touched on, but also that you can see from the referral that's in there about how we can, you know, do things, you know, maybe slightly differently to improve transparency, for no want of another word. Colleagues, the overall summary is a further underspend against the budget, although around half of that, as we mentioned just now, is requested to be carried forward into next year. So if approved, it will ultimately be spent. But again, that issue around timing and so on. And as I say, those explanations are detailed in table 4. As detailed in paragraph 8.3, the total proposed carry forward is 1.884 million. This is relevant when looking at the general fund balance. Paragraph 8.5 details the position on carry forwards from previous years. This shows that there are multiple areas where there are plans, as I mentioned just now, to spend money to deliver outcomes, but it's taking time. And as I say, we will follow up on that. Farr asked for further information. We will provide that as part of the quarter monitoring report. Paragraph 8.4 details that we've achieved the target level of efficiencies. Paragraph 8.6 through to 8.8 details performance against our corporate financial health income measures, which monitor our most significant sources of income. And obviously we've talked on, and obviously BJ mentioned around, you know, both obviously commercial waste, which will certainly sort of take away to look at, and clearly obviously garden waste and others. The year-end general fund position as per cabinet is there's 17.9 million, but that's with almost 1.9 million of carry forward. So net, that's around 16 million. When we set out the budget back in February 25, we were forecasting a year-end position of 14.4 million. So we're in a healthier position than we then forecast. Appendix 1 is provided at year end to summarise all the differences between the budget and actuals across the year. And as I say, Vijay certainly has set out some of the discussion that happened in far around that. The budget is essentially each quarter to avoid repeating explanations. So colleagues, we're asking for this report. It's referred to council to approve the transfers issue to and from reserves, but happy to move the other general recommendations in the report, Chair. And obviously, Ian and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Daniel Allen.
Does this include all of the costs associated with the hearing on the Barkway Road development in Royston?
For any costs incurred before the end of March, it should do, but I will double check to make sure. But yes, generally we should accrue any costs to make sure they're reflected in the year they were incurred in. But yeah, let me take away to double check.
Jim. Any other questions? So the recommendations are that Cabinet notes the report, approves a decrease of 1.385 million in the 25-26 net general fund expenditure as identified in section 8 to a total of 21.4 million. Approves the changes to the 26-27 general fund budget as identified in table 4 and paragraph 8.3, a total of 651k increase in net expenditure. Recommend to council that it approves the net transfer from earmark reserved as identified in table 9 of 4.925 million. Can I have a proposer, please? Ian Albert, a seconder. Councillor Daniel Allen. Debate. Councillor Nolan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think combining some of the outputs from the risk management item 14 in terms of our well-known and long-running risk around capacity, around staffing, and all the rest. With LGR on top of that, clearly it's always going to present a challenge to officers and staff in delivering everything as much as possible. It's something we need to keep monitoring. We need to keep being able to act on that and providing the resource and support as we can. But again, clearly, I think it's not the first time in the last few years we've seen this. Again, my own time on fire, it was a regular occurrence for that sort of move of spend into the next year, purely because it is so difficult sometimes to manage that delivery against everything else that's competing at the moment. I think we're in a fortunate position. We have staffing up to a level that's allowing us to manage things in terms of business as usual. But again, in terms of that forward-looking delivery of projects in particular, it's still something that I think we need to keep looking at for however long the council is in existence, to ensure we do everything we can do to support our staff.
Thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Okay, no. Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Dean, Treasury Management End of Year Review 25-26, referral from FAR.
Thanks, Chair. So this report again from 10th of June is looking at how the council has been investing any surplus cash that it had available, and it provides an end of year picture for 25-26. The overall headline, I suppose, is that our balances are declining due to the planned capital spends that we've been incurring, and therefore there's less available to invest. But because interest rates have stayed higher than expected, we're still doing better than expected. So despite the fact that we got a lower principal amount available, the council has generated 2.08 million of interest from its investments at the end of the 25-26 financial year. Now that's lower than last year, but as I say, it's higher than anticipated at the beginning of the financial year. Now, correspondingly, we considered that inflation is not coming down as quickly. So therefore, there's likely to be some increased costs in some other areas to offset that higher return on investment. So it's a balanced but mixed picture, I think, is fair to say. You can see at page 508 of your reports pack the current allocation of investments, i.e. where the council has invested its surplus cash. Which is also considered by the committee overall, and that investment landscape takes into account the council motion earlier in the year on responsible investment, which is good. At para 8.9 at page 491 of the reports, it shows the investments outstanding as of 31st of March 2026, and that totals 25.5 million. Just to exemplify that decrease in capital amount, this compares with 45 million at the same time last year. So this is indicative of the capital program that we've committed to undertaking overall. So yeah, it's a snapshot of where we are, but no major comments on that from the committee other than to recognise that good on the returns on the investment, but it's not something we can guarantee to have coming in over the long term over the next couple of years.
Thank you. Any questions? No. May I go to Councillor Ian Albert, please?
Thanks, Chair. And again, obviously, thanks to Councillor Pupler-Singham and the team, the FAR team, for their consideration. And I think, obviously, one of the discussions there that Vijay touched on was around, obviously, how we seek to and continue to seek to apply the policy that we agreed around our both from the motion before Christmas and indeed our Treasury strategy that was adopted in February. Clearly, as Vijay said, that obviously that 2.08 million of interest from investments clearly welcome, but obviously we know some of the reasons why that money has been generated, and clearly, obviously, whilst higher inflation somewhat benefits our interest and so on, clearly, actually, in all the rest of the organisation, and more importantly to our residents, is an impact upon them directly. So these are difficult issues, and we seek to try and balance and obviously manage the council's money wisely. As I say, the position at the end of the year is very similar to the position at Q3 in terms of our spread of investments and the interest earned. As an end-of-year report, we're required to note the breach of the strategy earlier in the year. See paragraph 8.1, and we've obviously talked about this at a previous cabinet meeting. This has already been covered previously, but along with the actions to help and make sure that it doesn't happen again. Investments continue to focus on security and liquidity first, and then the interest earned. And the appendix on page 508 of the pack is a graph showing our investments at year end. We had one residual bank investment that was taken out before the new Treasury strategy was adopted in February. This has now matured. So the reports referred to Council so they can improve the year-end prudential and Treasury indicators. So happy to move those recommendations, Chair, and obviously Ian and I are happy to pick up any questions colleagues might have.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Nolan. Questions? Then debate. Any questions? Councillor Debenham.
So see, we've got, if I can read properly, £2 million invested in Surrey County Council. Is that subject to a forthcoming LGR, or has that been and gone? And if it is, what would happen to the money?
That was a question that Ian was asked and Ian responded to, and I'll let him give his same answer at the cabinet as he gave to FAR. Ian.
They've not been LGR'd yet. That is a 31st of March 2027 timeline for them. But if there were any outstanding investments with a authority going through LGR and the investments are still outstanding at the point of that, the debt would move to one of the new authorities and they would repay it as it became due. So there'd be no issues or risks associated with that.
Debate? Comments? Vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Right. Item 17. Capital End of Year Review 25-26. It fell from FAR.
Thanks, Chair. And I believe my final report to comment on for this evening. This was the capital end of year review for 25-26, considering the outturn position at the end of year on the capital spend. Table 1, which is at page 515 of the cabinet reports, details that total expenditure against the approved capital budgets during the course of the year. I suppose the headline there is that there is an underspend against the budget of 1.448 mil. Table 2, following on similar on page 515, sets out where that slippage has occurred within the capital schemes. In particular, the report highlights the leisure centre decarbonisation project has been affected by delays due to the need to secure certain legal agreements. As a result, there's been a bit of slippage both in the programme and a requirement to increase the project budget on that item to cover the additional costs, which is including the use of temporary boiler provision. This is one that I picked up at committee as well, and it's a fairly significant increase on that project overall at 839k overarchingly. So just another one that does need to be kept under review, because we don't want to keep increasing those costs on that one. Table 3 details the in-year variances across the individual capital projects, which the committee did have a look at, which is helpful and it provides us that little extra detail. However, when you look at para 8.6, which is at page 518 of your reports, it does highlight the projects that have been successfully completed during 25-26 as well. So those include the Hitchin Skate Park, which we heard about earlier this evening, and the significant upgrades to leisure centres across North Herts overall. Further down on page 518 of your reports, the committee also considered the financing of the capital programme. So as detailed in para 8.7, we are now in a position of needing to borrow, which probably not too much surprise considering the comments from our previous report on the outturn, how heavy our capital investment is. Borrowing is currently being undertaken internally against reserves, but it is anticipated that we can continue with that approach, particularly as the most significant capital expenditure has now taken place during 25 and 26. So whilst the council does retain that option of external borrowing, the interest rates remain relatively high, so we do need to keep that under review as we go forward. This will, because we are in a position of having to borrow, we did consider that this is going to have an impact on the revenue budget, because we now need to incur a minimum revenue provision charge in the next year's budget. So that'll be for 26-27. We don't know that exact figure, I don't think, but we heard at committee it's going to be the low hundreds of thousands. I can look to Ian Cooper to confirm that I'm right on that one. I think overall we're in a good position, all of that said, for the plans currently in place and vis-a-vis the council plan. But as I said previously, something we're going to have to keep an eye on in terms of the spends, keep those in review, particularly if we see any upward spends on budgets increasing over the next little while. I should say thanks to FAR for not just this report, but their work on all the reports over the year. Also to Ian Cooper for his support at FAR, and to Councillor Albert for joining us at FAR every occasion to support us in our discussions overall. But otherwise, happy to support those recommendations.
Thank you very much. Questions? Director of Resources.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Just to comment on what the Chair of the Finance and Risk was saying, I need to correct what I said at FAR. So the actual amount we have budgeted for minimum revenue provision in 26-27 is actually 1.4 million. I was remembering the movements between the 2 years rather than the actual pure number. It's fully in the budget, so it's not an issue in terms of the budget was set aside, just my memory. But I will correct it at the next FAR meeting as well, make sure they're aware of the correct figure too.
Thank you. You'll be able to sleep tonight. You know. Councillor Albert.
Thank you, and thanks, Chair. And my final thanks for this occasion to VJ and the FAR team. And I think you can see what the level of consideration that FAR has given, and I think also the importance of having the independent member of FAR there. I think that's a really important part of the committee, and so yeah, very much welcome that both sort of challenge and comment and support. I think I'm going to start on paragraph 8.6 that the VJ touched upon, which is the kind of capital projects and those range of capital projects that have been completed during the course of the year. You know, we touched on earlier on the King George Skate Park, that whole range of leisure centre updates, refurbishments, new equipment, and so on. You know, a big investment, but actually really important investment for the health and well-being of our communities. And I think there's a fantastic story to tell that I know that Councillor Amy Allen has told in many places and so on. And I think it's a fantastic achievement for Councillor Allen and all our officer team that actually getting those refurbished in place that people who go to Royston, to North Herts, to Hitchin actually can really see the difference and the new facilities that are on offer there. It's fantastic, and we'll no doubt see sort of Amy on her spin bike again or whatever again. Although let me also say we've seen Councillor Val Bryant on a scooter, I think, as well in recent times. So I think all of these actually help all ages of our community, both young people, but obviously older members of our community as well. These facilities are a huge benefit, and I think we could take some pride and credit as a council, but as an administration, as a council, in actually making a lot of these changes. So really welcome that and all the work that's been done. I think it's right to say, however, that clearly the report does start, and obviously we've talked about resourcing and so on, and there is that just over £1 million of capital slippage and a net underspend on completed projects of just under 300,000. The slippage in Table 2 includes a need to increase the budget of the leisure centre decarbonisation project, and you'll see from the referral the reasons for some of that, which were indeed partly foreseen, but the exact route of the cables was unknown until after the project commenced, and there's been some legal delays. And I think there will be obviously clearly some lessons to learn there for the future. But I think the project is a good one. But clearly that has been an issue, and we've identified that in the report here. Paragraph, as I've touched on, all the projects that have been completed already, and obviously, of course, in terms of carry forwards, as we mentioned before in earlier reports. Again, obviously, we will continue to look at capacity to deliver, and look at those same capital projects in the same way we will look at the revenue carry forwards to see what can be done. Are these projects likely to be delivered by when and so on. And we'll continue to keep all those things under review. And I think that hopefully cabinet colleagues and council as a whole will welcome that. As detailed in Table 4, overall we spent £22 million on capital projects during the year, a significant sum. And as per the strategy set at the start of the year, most of this is funded by internal borrowing. Ian has obviously made the correction about the minimum revenue provision, but obviously just to add to that, the actual minimum revenue cost will be less due to capital slippage, and this will be monitored through the quarterly reports during 26-27. So again, I think things to keep under review, particularly where we're looking at projects that have either slipped or moved forward into this in this financial year. We'll certainly need to consider all of those things carefully as we move to budget setting. But God, it's only 8 months away, or whatever number of months we get to February. So these are things that we'll need to carefully consider in the coming month as we set what could well be our final North Herts Council budget in February. So, Chair, happy to obviously move the recommendations in the report, and obviously that where there and obviously any referrals as necessary to council. So, yeah, I'm complete there, and obviously happy to answer any questions that colleagues might have.
Right. First of all, can we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any questions? Councillor Albert. Any debate? Oh, Councillor Allen.
Sorry to keep things going longer. The laptop refresh has an estimated impact on our next budget of £90,000. Now, I know the laptop refresh is mainly for officers and people working for the council, but I do think we need to have a look as councillors, because some councillors only run on a tablet, some on a laptop. At least one councillor doesn't have either and just runs off their mobile phone. I think that we might have an opportunity to review some spending here in a do it this way. We can't be so flexible because some people, as we've realised, can't open full items on their mobile phones. Some people complain they can't make their tablets work at certain angles or whatever. They can't get the full things out. So can we just say, get a laptop, get on with it and accept it?
Member for this area.
It's something I can speak to the IT team around, whether it is driving any of that cost. I can't say from the moment exactly whether or not that would make a massive impact, but yeah, I'm happy to take that one away.
Okay. Debate. No. Vote.
Chair, that motion is carried.
The officers approve is that so that Councillor Claydon will not have to sit here for another hour outside on his own, like Billy No Mates, that in fact we go on to the Churchgate ones. Is that okay? Yes. So if we do the exclusion of the press and public, and then we will, because Councillor Bimsing's going now, aren't you? Yes, I've got a conscience about you. Yes. If we can organise that, I think will that be useful? Well, right. Yes. Yes. We will have a medal struck on you in your name. Right, so we'll go as it is. Item 22, exclusion of press and public. Now that means that does Councillor Claydon have to go, or can he stay?
You can stay if you, Chair, are comfortable with him remaining in the room because it's on a need to know basis.
Yes, I think I'm comfortable with it. Right. Night. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Nolan. Can we have a vote on, this is on exclusion?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 24. Allocation of MHCLG Homelessness Grant Part 1. Councillor Mick Debenham to present.
Thank you very much. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the proposed allocation of homelessness funding received from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. North Hertfordshire Council has received a multi-year funding settlement of approximately £2.8 million over the next 3 years. The funding is ring-fenced. It must be used to support the council in meeting its statutory homelessness duties. This report sets out proposals for allocating part of this funding. The proposals align with grant conditions, national policy and local priorities as detailed in Table 4. The majority of the funding will support the 2 single homelessness schemes in operation within the district. These services are delivered on behalf of the council by Key Stage Housing and One YMCA. It is proposed to allocate approximately £700,000 to Key Stage Housing over the next 3 years. The allocation for the current financial year is lower than that for years 2 and 3. This reflects an interim payment of £58,000 made in May. The interim payment was required due to Key Stage only receiving reduced housing benefit income. This has caused them problems in qualifying for the higher benefit rate, which placed them in financial pressure. Arrangements are being finalised to hopefully resolve this going forward. It is proposed to allocate £81,000 to One YMCA. This will enable an increase in provision at Anderson House. Capacity will increase from 46 to 71 residents. This will be achieved by reconfiguring existing accommodation. Some flats will be adapted by replacing internal doors with fire doors, for which this funding applies, thus creating 17 additional units. The 2 former warden houses will also be brought into use. These will provide step-down accommodation for a further 8 individuals. In addition, £8,000 is proposed for Hearts Young Homeless. This organisation delivers education programmes for secondary-age pupils across local schools. This leaves a total of £616,000 unallocated, not the £674,000 as incorrectly stated in Table 4. The proposed allocations will support the council in meeting its homelessness duties. They will also enhance local provision and increase accommodation capacity across the district.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, just wondering, do we have any contingency plans if the partner organisations aren't able to deliver services?
We've been paying since last March at the reduced rate. So what they get now is what they get. So we're no longer on a risk. The only risk would be them not being able to continue providing the service.
Have you got the answer? Any other questions? So Councillor Albert.
I wonder whether I'm the medical officer where we see. I was going to use the phrase direction of travel. That's horrible in a homelessness situation. Let me rephrase that. I think is where do we see how our sort of plans in trying to reduce homelessness generally are progressing? Looking at these numbers, have we got sort of a positive there that the services we're providing are helping to reduce homelessness across our district?
Well, certainly we've still got spare accommodation, so there's not an influx of. We're not inundated with homeless, luckily. But I don't know if Martin's listening in, if he's got any thoughts on that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Debenham. So in general terms, Councillor Albert, we have about less than 100 households in temporary accommodation. So at 56,000, it's quite a low number, to be honest. The team are always trying to prevent homelessness, and when a household is homeless, trying to relieve that homelessness. The real challenge is with single people and occasional couples that come with multiple support needs, and the pathway you've probably heard referenced in the past from the street to full independence is a real challenge to resource. So Key Stage and YMCA form a big part of that pathway, but we need people to be able to access accommodation on the day. We need step down that Councillor Debenham talked about for people who don't quite need that same amount of support. We need HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. We don't have enough resource in the pathway. We're always trying to find more. So it's great. We've got a stable position, so to speak, for people of the higher need, but equally housing first, a real challenge for us. That's where people are accommodated in the same accommodation and the support reduces over time and they can remain there forever. That's a real challenge to resource with our partners. So I like to think it's going in the right direction, but it's certainly a long-term challenge. LGR might throw some opportunities up because we'll be with at least one stock holding council, possibly two. When you've got your own bricks and mortar, you have more control and more capacity to do things. So we're optimistic and we're always looking for opportunities. It's certainly moved on a lot since 2019. The pandemic really put a lot of needs, brought a lot of needs to the fore, and we've made great strides as a council, but there's still a long way to go. Thanks.
Any other questions or debate? No. So recommendations are that the Cabinet approves the funding proposals for the allocation of homelessness, rough sleeping and domestic abuse grants received from MHCLG as outlined in Table 4 in paragraph 8.11. Can I have a proposer, please? And seconder, Daniel Allen. Debate. Councillor Albert.
I'm happy to support the paper, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Short and sharp, short and sweet. No. Right, should we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
So we're now on item 11. Yes. GA2 land access. We're just going with this, aren't we? It's no. Yes. So I've got to remind you, as members, that a general dispensation has been granted to all councillors this item by the Monitoring Officer under Appendix C, A, C, D and E of North Herts Councillor Code of Conduct. There we are. Councillor Tamsin Thomas to present.
Thank you, Chair. Is that working? Yeah, great, sorry. And apologies to Cabinet for arriving late. So thank you for the adjustments to the agenda. So I appreciate it. As Executive Member for Enterprise with oversight of the estates function, I'm pleased to introduce the follow-up report on the proposed sale of land at GA2, which seeks Cabinet's approval to now proceed with the option agreement for the potential sale of a council-owned parcel of land approved at Cabinet in September last year. The terms for the option agreement were subject to notices being published in accordance with section 122 and 123 of the LGA 1972 and to giving due consideration to objections received. This process relating to the appropriation of open space for planning purposes and disposal of the land has now been completed with no objections or representations made. The land is required to facilitate access to the strategic housing site known as GA2, allocated under policy SP18 of the local plan. GA2 is a key development site located in the northeast of Great Ashby in the parish of Weston, allocated for approximately 600 new homes, along with community infrastructure, including a school, care home, retail centre and open space provision. A strategic master plan for the site was approved by Cabinet and ratified by full council in November 2024. To enable delivery of this new neighbourhood, a new access road is required from Mendip Way. This road crosses 5 parcels of land owned by separate parties, one of which is the council. The proposed option is part of a wider collaboration with the 4 other landowners and will give the developer, Picture Estates Limited, the right to acquire the access land, subject to planning permission being secured. The council's land is currently public open space with a playground, and any loss will be fully mitigated through new provision in the development. The developer will be responsible for re-providing and enhancing the play and open space as part of the new development. The option agreement has been carefully structured to ensure the council obtains best value, with external valuation and legal oversight in place. Importantly, the council will not bear upfront legal or professional costs. These are to be covered initially by the developer and deducted from the final proceeds of sale, which will be shared equally among the 5 landowners. Should Cabinet approve the recommendation, the council as landowner will help unlock this key housing site and associated infrastructure, while also securing a future capital receipt. Phil Doggett is available should you have any questions, but the recommendation is that Cabinet notes the proposals to appropriate open space for planning purposes and to dispose of the open land has been publicly advertised in compliance with the requirements of Section 122 and Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972. And that Cabinet appropriates for planning purposes pursuant to Sections 122 of the Local Government Act 1972, the land that is subject to the transaction for the purposes of facilitating the development of the GA2 site, including the provision of the new access road and associated works and infrastructure. And 2.3, that Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Resources in consultation with the Executive Member for Resources to finalise, complete, sign and seal all necessary documentation associated with the transaction, subject to receipt of valuation advice confirming compliance with the Council's duty under Section 123 of the Local Government Act to obtain best consideration reasonably obtainable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Thomas or Phil Doggett? Councillor Williams.
So we've had the master plan for G2. We haven't had planning permission yet. So what happens to this if the development doesn't go ahead?
If the development doesn't go overhead, we will retain our ownership. I will pass over to Phil Doggett for more technical information.
Yes, if planning permission does not go ahead, then the option cannot be exercised, and the land will be retained by the council in its current use, and it won't proceed. Expected to be unlikely because it's already got an allocation, and I understand the planning permission's passing through the process at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Phil. You say the land will stay in its current use. It's a lot of open space and it includes a playground. So why are we looking to sell this open space?
Where the access to the site must come off Mendip Way, and it passes through where we've currently got the open space and the playground, as you say. The development can't proceed unless the access is taken from that route. So this process enables us to appropriate the land for planning permission for a new use, and sign the option agreement. And one of the conditions is that the satisfactory re-provision of the open space and play area, which is going to be enhanced elsewhere within the development, just to the north of the current site. So it's our ability as landowner, along with others, to enable it to be unlocked, and the re-provision to be made, so that public still have access to open space and play area, and in fact increased.
Councillor Thomas.
Just to stress that there is that re-provisioning piece, but it is the it's the unlock that enables the site to proceed with 600 new homes. So we need those homes. So it's crucial that that happens, but it's also critical that's balanced with the reprovisioning of both the space and the playground, and ideally the enhancement of those through the investment.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can I ask for a proposer, please? Oh, sorry, Councillor Debenham.
Just, I expect this to be a stupid question, but is there any chance that the other landowners part of that site could not come to a deal and this would fall through no fault of our own?
Phil, do you want to take that one?
There is a risk. They're not bound to be a party to it, but this is the position we're in now has been, years of discussion and negotiation, and all landowners are expected to receive a capital receipt. So I think that's unlikely, but yes, in theory, it is possible that one party could decide not to continue, but albeit I think a very small risk.
Answer your question. Yeah. Where was I? Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Thomas.
Happy to.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Albert. Debate. Councillor Albert. You're still on the screen?
Nope.
No. Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. We've probably got his pyjamas on by now.
Thank you.
That's allowed.
Thank you.
Item 18, exclusion of press and public. I propose under section 100A of Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting on grounds that the following report will be involved a likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 4 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the said Act as amended. Can I have a seconder, please? So Nolan. Vote, please. Susan. I think I may not have voted then, but it's too late to vote.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Welcome back. Item 21, Churchgate Regeneration Update and Next Steps, Part 1. Referral from Overview Scrutiny. May I invite Councillor John Claydon.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Part 1 aspect of the Churchgate development, and ONS appreciated the opportunity to look at and comment on the next steps and the allocation of funds as referenced in the Part 2 report. With regards to recommendations, ONS is noting and feeding back on those steps, and also making its recommendation to you to make your recommendation to the council. So we've got another step to go after this process, but there were no objections to those recommendations, and they were carried forward by ONS. But there were some points that were raised along the way, which I'll just briefly summarize. So as was touched on during our discussion in Part 2 briefly, the ONS was keen to ensure that no softening of quality or affordable housing requirements will occur as a result as a result of the updated process. There was also some question about what happens with regards to sign off on spend once the shadow authority comes into being, and how that will pan out. There was a question about why we can't do this work in-house, which I think was fairly straightforwardly dealt with. I think we've again touched on that this evening already in Part 2. I think there was a question about the balance of risk between us and the developer. As time goes on, one could argue the risk for us increases at the cost of, but balanced against reducing the risk to the developer ultimately. But there was also, I think, concerns about, increasing costs, which again I mentioned in my introduction to the Part 2. The fact that, of course, we must always bear in mind that these costs, as they come along, are ultimately borne by council taxpayers. That sunk costs can be distorting, and that there should always be a point where we would say that enough is enough, but I don't think ONS takes the view that we've reached that point yet. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Claydon? Councillor Albert?
Yeah, can I just sort of clarify John's sort of last point? Obviously, the points were made in the debate that there was a fear that this project had reached a tipping point. But I'm not sure that necessarily that it is completely clear in the conclusions that the committee didn't feel that we had gone or hadn't gone beyond that point. I think I know the answer because I was there at the debate, but I mean, perhaps John could, just formally clarify again that we certainly hadn't reached that tipping point, as might have been suggested as in part of the debate by some colleagues.
Yeah, that was not, as I said, that was not a position that ONS formally took. It was merely a comment that was made during the course of the debate that it's something that there has to be a tipping point at some point. There is some figure beyond which we can't go. But I don't think that the view of the committee as a whole was that we were at that point.
Yeah, I was present as well, and it was one member who was making a headline, let's say. Sorry, it's getting late. My mask is slipping. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Claydon and ONS. So I'm pleased to present the following report, which marks the important point in the progression of the Churchgate regeneration project. Since full council in July 2025, the project board and team have worked to properly test some of the most important and challenging issues associated with the future of the site, including viability, parking, public realm, the future of the market, governance, delivery models, and the long-term sustainability of Hitchin Town Centre. Over the past year, that work has been undertaken in considerable detail. What is important tonight is that the council is now in a fundamentally stronger position than it was 12 months ago. We now have a much clearer understanding of the site and its constraints, a stronger technical and financial evidence base, a better understanding of viability and delivery channels, and importantly, much greater insight into market appetite and delivery expectations. The soft market engagement work undertaken over recent months has also confirmed that there remains strong confidence in Hitchin as a place. Through early engagement with developers, investors, and regeneration specialists, the feedback has consistently been that Hitchin is viewed as an attractive and credible town centre regeneration opportunity with strong long-term potential. Things I think we all know and agree with. At the same time, the market has also been clear that this is a complex and finely balanced scheme. It requires careful feasibility work, detailed delivery planning, and a proportionate approach to risk before any future delivery route is fully determined. And that is why the recommendations before us tonight are focused on the next stages of feasibility, viability, and delivery planning. This is not simply a continuation of the previous visioning work. The council is now seeking to appoint specialist regeneration expertise to work alongside the project team in refining a deliverable scheme and supporting the transition from a strategic ambition into detailed delivery planning and implementation. The phased approach being proposed is designed to ensure that the investment, funding, and risk remain proportionate to the level of certainty available at each stage of the project, and that this reflects both the scale and the complexity of the opportunity and the consistent feedback received through market engagement regarding the most appropriate and credible route forward for the council and any future partners. It enables the council to continue progressing the project in a measured and controlled way, to retain strategic and oversight and decision-making control, and to further test viability and deliverability and reduce uncertainty before any future long-term delivery or partnership decisions are taken. At ONS, the committee asked if confirmation of the site viability might mean a softening on the commitment to quality, to affordable housing limits, and to value for money for our taxpayers. And the answer is that no, that is not the case. The next stage is to allow the council to precisely test the design, quality and viability and deliverability considerations together as a package. We were also asked about the impact of the LGR timeline, which Councillor Clayton cleared off. So ultimately, the ambition remains to deliver a viable, high quality and deliverable regeneration scheme capable of supporting the long-term vitality, sustainability and future success of Hitchin Town Centre. The recommendation is that Cabinet recommends to Council the approval of the additional capital that was funding that was set out in Part 2 to support the next phase of the Churchgate regeneration project. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Councillor Thomas? No. So, recommendations. The Cabinet recommend to the Council that it approves the additional capital / revenue funding set out in the Part 2 report to support the next phase of the Churchgate regeneration project. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Thomas, and a seconder. Councillor Allen, thank you. Debate. Who would like? Councillor Albert.
Just thanks, Chair. Now, I'm also chair the Hitchin Community Forum. I fully support this paper. I think this is the right way forward. It's a hugely important project for Hitchin, for the district, for the council, for residents, and we need to get it right. And I think Councillor Thomas has absolutely hit the right notes and explaining why and what is the importance of doing what we're doing. And I think that's vital. But I think it's also right to say, and this is why I might well be proposing an additional recommendation, Chair, is that we also need to make sure that we communicate well what we're doing. And that's a challenge to me as part of the project board, to the project board, because when I in my 5-minute break earlier on went to look at the Churchgate website on the council, the council, they haven't been updated for some considerable period of time. Now, we've got in front of us this evening as now public papers, as these a very large number of documents that I don't think have been published anywhere else previously. There's parking reviews, there's SWOT analysis, there's a whole raft of stuff. All this is available on the council's website and now web pages because it was part of this cabinet meeting. There is a considerable number of pages there. So my additional recommendation, Chair, I think is from cabinet, I think to the if we can to the project board, is that the project board needs to urgently look at how we formally publish these papers and update our websites and communicate the decisions. And I think obviously issue, and I appreciate we've got another stage on this going to full council and so on, but obviously communicate the decisions that I think Cabinet will hopefully rightly take this evening in supporting this paper, but also in supporting actually what is now a large amount of detail, and it is a lot of pages, and I'm sure Councillor Thomas will agree with me, it's a lot of pages, and it's really good information here, but it isn't documents for the most part that I think have been shared out to our wider community, and we need to look at how we do this. They can't be just documents that should sit on a ModGov page or an NHDC meetings page under Cabinet, because these are now public papers. And I think now we need to actually work out what we do, because most of this stuff was not these documents, and I think they're really valuable, and it shows the kind of level of work that I think has been done by officers, the project board, and so on in trying to get this project right. But now we actually need to actually explain that very really well, and really importantly, I think, to the wider community. So
some words.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So happy to hopefully to support those words and move that recommendation.
The words. For the Cabinet to instruct officers to review the external comms regarding this project in order to improve public transparency.
I think that kind of captures it, but I think
see it.
No. I think the important thing here is that we need to. It's actually to make sure that we make a wider community aware of this range of documents that are there. So it's not just the communications. I think it's actually the way we deal with the published documents that are now published.
That's good.
Himself multiple times there. These documents were available at UK Reef because they were designed to be used as part of this for developers. They aren't designed for members of the public. Happy to share them, no problems with that whatsoever, but just to keep saying over again, we need share, that's something that you could have discussed with Councillor Thomas beforehand, and we've got to have the right documents available for people to see.
Chair, let me come back on that. I understand what Councillor Allen is saying, and it's late at night now. But obviously, Councillor Thomas wasn't available for conversation. But also, importantly, is that having only myself looked at, and clearly you will have obviously looked at it as well, looked at the Churchgate website earlier on, having seen quite the level, and obviously having read all these papers, I assume these papers clearly must have been obviously published, but they haven't been. And I think now we need to make sure, since we have now published them as part of this meeting's papers, is how we publish them formally to our wider community.
Can I just take a step back? I'm going to have a go at this. That if 2.2 is about communicating well and the Churchgate website being updated, being kept updated, right? That's what we're after. Then I think if we stick with the wording we've got, it means that we are giving information at the project and improving public transparency, but then actually making sure the documents we give are appropriate to what the public actually wants to see, rather than everything that's there, and that then becomes an officer decision. I think we all agree about our intent, I think, here.
I think
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you to Councillor Albert and to Councillor Daniel Allen, because I know that both of those councillors and myself have repeatedly asked at various project boards about the stakeholder engagement, that this is a real heavy lift project with a team that are delivering a huge amount of projects beyond the Churchgate redevelopment scheme. And it is important that we are effectively communicating with stakeholders on the major project. I think we all share that concern. I think it's also right that there's been a phasing issue of wanting to communicate when there's something to communicate, that there's a lot of complexity in the project. The public want to see progress, so we want to communicate to demonstrate progress, and we're obviously at that stage. And I just wanted to put forward, Councillor Bryan, a potential. It is late and I am jet lagged. It's a few hours, okay. There is also the option at having communications officers attend project board meetings, and for us to potentially consider that on the museum project board, because of the public outreach nature of that scheme. Every project board meeting is attended by a member of the comms team, and it just may be that one measure we can look at, given the stage we're at in the project, is to make sure that my officers have actually got cross-council support, given that the scheme is entering a phase where the rate of public communication is going to be escalating. So just an alternative proposal beyond just asking officers to review and update the website. And I do agree with Councillor Allen that the documents as presented are not the most passable, and you would want to put on additional layers of communication to support their reading.
Well, it's interesting that the people who are talking are all on the project board. But I just wonder whether we could have this conversation on Thursday. I mean, we're taking it seriously. It's a case of whether you actually want a formal recommendation or you want the outcome, which you're more concerned about. I'm going to ask somebody who's not on the project board. Sean, your name's down.
Thanks, Chair. I think that of the points that Councillor Albert has made, I think one of them that stands out a bit for someone who's not been involved in the detail is that I think that the documents as they are, because of the nature in which they've been presented, are now in the public sphere, regardless of their appropriateness. I think fundamentally there is a huge amount now of the data that's gone into the background work, which is available now, without maybe the ability for us to tell the story around some of it in terms of how we've got to that point, the kind of how it's being used and therefore what the outputs are. The work is underway, and I recognise that the project team the reason we're here tonight is because we progressed to the point that we are now in position to start, spend the money to make decisions and push on to that next level of detail in terms of from feasibility to design. I think that hopefully trying to gain what Ian you're saying is that if the information is out there and it's now available and can be viewed, we just need to make sure that we're keeping pace, in terms of being able to show the progress, and it's not just, data sitting out in an environment kind of unkept and unread, and is actually part of that work stream that's led us to the point now where we are getting close to being able to really propel the project into a delivery phase rather than feasibility as it has been for some time. So yeah, regardless of exactly how we word it, it's ensuring that we have that work underway to, you know, tell the story around the data rather than just have it out there.
I think it's just worth. I think it's just worth adding.
Really?
Sorry, I think it's just worth adding that many. Whilst I take Councillor Albert's point that these documents are now available in the public domain, many of there were 8 background documents, and many of those, I think probably 5 of those, are quite technical working documents prepared for internal decision-making purposes, rather than designed for public audience. So they can be quite specialized, they can be quite isolated around a particular topic, and potentially, without wanting to be patronizing, they can potentially be difficult to interpret, interpret without the wider context. So I fully agree that it would definitely be helpful to consider how we can move towards providing more clear, accessible updates, maybe sort of summaries that communicate progress, that communicate decisions, and next steps in a way that is clear and transparent for residents and other stakeholders. And we can look at doing that within the officer group and project board, as Councillor Albert and Councillor Thomas have suggested.
So Daniel Allen in a second. I think I'll come to him now.
Okay, I just wanted to go back to where we were starting. This is one of the most exciting projects that we've got going. It's the biggest thing North Hants Council have ever done. It's the biggest thing that's going to have happened to Hitchin in, well, not hundreds of years, that's an exaggeration, in at least 50 years. It is going to be amazing. And if we're worried about investing £200,000 now in a project that is going to cost tens of millions, we need to really question ourselves. This is brilliant stuff, and I'm definitely voting for it.
Thank you, because I've almost forgotten there was a starting point of this. Just let me just hang on to the end point for the moment. Another go at the wording, which hopefully is the last go at the wording. For the second part, instruct officers to undertake a review of the council's external communications approach with a specific focus on improving transparency, accessibility, and the visibility of key decision-making information. I've got a nod of Councillor Albert. Any more nods? 3.5. 2.5 over that side. 4, 5.5. Yep. Right, so that I think is the best so far. So we're back to where we were before when I was reading it out. I've got scribbles on paper here now. So we've got the first part, which is about the funding. Yes, this is the money we don't mention because this isn't part 1. And then we've got the second part, which we'll read like that. Yeah. Anybody want to add anything else before we go to the vote? Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. And I will promise that I will act on this on Thursday. Thank you. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yes. So at some unworldly time, 23:20, I will call this meeting to a close. Thank you very much. And Councillor Claydon, get your medal on the way out.
Good night, everyone.